Iranian military official just went on camera and said something that should make every American pay attention. He said Iran is waiting for American ground troops, not worried about them, not scared of them, waiting for them, like a hunter who has already set the trap and is just sitting quietly for the animal to walk in. While the Pentagon is shipping thousands of paratroopers and Marines to the Middle East and making plans for ground raids along the Iranian coast, Iran is publicly telling the world that a ground war is exactly what it wants. By the end of this video, you will fully understand why Iran is so confident, what kind of trap is being set in those mountains, and why every military expert who has studied this is quietly begging Washington not to take the bait. Let us start with the basics. For 30 days now, the United States and Israel have been bombing Iran from the air. They have hit military bases, nuclear sites, weapons factories, and even universities. They killed the supreme leader in the first week. They wiped out most of Iran's top military commanders. They have destroyed more targets in 1 month than they did in the entire first Gulf War. By every measure of air power, the campaign has been devastating. But here is the problem. It has not worked. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Oil prices are still above $100 a barrel. Iran is still firing missiles at Israel, at Saudi Arabia, at American bases. The Houthis in Yemen just jumped into the fight, and Iran's government, despite losing its top leader and dozens of generals, has not collapsed. It has not surrendered. It has not even come to the negotiating table in any real way. 30 days of the most intense bombing campaign in 20 years, and Iran is still standing. So now the conversation in Washington has shifted to something much more dangerous: ground troops. The Pentagon has already sent about 3,500 soldiers to the region, including paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division and Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. Reports say military planners are drawing up options for limited ground operations lasting several weeks, possibly including a raid on Karg Island, the tiny piece of land in the Persian Gulf that handles 90% of Iran's oil exports. But here is what nobody in the White House seems to want to talk about. Iran has been preparing for exactly this scenario for over 40 years, not preparing like buying some weapons and hoping for the best, preparing like a country that knows it cannot match America's technology and has instead built an entirely different kind of defense designed specifically to make a ground invasion the worst decision any American president could ever make. Let me explain what American soldiers would actually be walking into. Iran is not Iraq. Iraq is mostly flat desert. You can see for miles. Tanks roll across it easily. Air support can hit anything that moves. Iran is the opposite. The western half of the country is dominated by the Zagros Mountains, a massive wall of rock and ridgelines that runs for over 900 miles from the Turkish border all the way down to the Persian Gulf. Some of these peaks are taller than anything in the Rocky Mountains. The passes between them are narrow, winding, and easy to defend. An army trying to push through the Zagros would be funneled into tight valleys where a few hundred fighters with the right weapons could hold off thousands. On the northern side, there is another mountain range called the Alborz, which includes the tallest peak in the entire Middle East. And between these two mountain ranges sits a vast central plateau of harsh desert. There are essentially only 2 or 3 ways to drive a large military force into Iran, and Iran has been studying those routes and fortifying them since 1979. But the mountains are just the beginning. Buried inside those mountains is something that military planners call missile cities. These are not just bunkers, they are entire underground military bases carved into the rock, with tunnels stretching for dozens of miles. They have command centers, living quarters, weapons assembly lines, and launch platforms for ballistic missiles. Iran has built roughly 2,500 missiles and hidden most of them inside these mountain fortresses. The deepest of these facilities are buried so far underground that even America's biggest bunker-busting bombs, the 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator, may not be able to reach them. Think about what that means for ground troops. You are not fighting an enemy standing in front of you. You are fighting an enemy that is inside the mountain, that can fire a missile from a tunnel opening and then disappear back into the rock before you even know where the shot came from. America spent 20 years in Afghanistan fighting an enemy that hid in caves and mountains. Iran has taken that concept and industrialized it. These are not crude caves, these are engineered, reinforced, ventilated military installations with electricity, communications, and enough supplies to operate for months without any outside support. And it gets worse. Iran's military does not fight the way the American military fights. America builds its entire strategy around centralized command. One general gives orders, those orders flow down to units in the field, everyone follows the same plan. Iran figured out years ago that this kind of structure has a fatal weakness. If you take out the general, the whole system breaks down. So Iran designed something completely different. They call it mosaic defense. Instead of one command center controlling everything, Iran has broken its military into dozens of semi-independent units spread across the country. Each unit has its own commander, its own weapons, and its own orders to follow if communications are cut. Killing one commander does not affect the others. Destroying one base does not shut down the network. It is like trying to kill a swarm of bees by squashing one at a time. You can keep killing individual bees, but the swarm keeps coming. The Revolutionary Guard, which is the most powerful military force in Iran, has built this system specifically to fight America. They studied every American war since Vietnam. They watched how quickly the Iraqi army collapsed when Saddam's command structure was destroyed. They watched how the Taliban survived for 20 years by avoiding big battles and using hit-and-run tactics. And they designed a hybrid that combines the survivability of guerrilla warfare with the firepower of a real military. They have anti-ship missiles hidden along hundreds of miles of coastline. They have fast attack boats that can swarm a warship before it has time to react. They have thousands of naval mines ready to be dropped into the Persian Gulf, and they have something that neither the Taliban nor the Iraqi insurgents ever had: ballistic missiles that can hit American bases in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. America learned what those missiles can do just last week, when 10 soldiers were wounded at an air base in Saudi Arabia. That base is supposed to be one of the safest places in the region, hundreds of miles from Iran, protected by air defense systems. Iran hit it anyway. Now imagine what happens when American ground troops are not hundreds of miles away, but inside Iranian territory, within range of everything Iran has. There is a reason why every single military expert who has studied this question comes to the same conclusion. A full-scale ground invasion of Iran would require hundreds of thousands of troops and would likely last years, not weeks. Iran has 960,000 military personnel, plus millions of trained reserves who can be called up. The country has 88 million people, most of whom would see an invasion as an attack on their homeland regardless of how they feel about their own government. Even Iranians who hate the regime would pick up a weapon to fight foreign soldiers on their soil. That is not speculation. That is what happened in the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, when millions of ordinary Iranians volunteered to fight even though they were being sent into battle with minimal training and equipment. Iran fought that war for 8 years and never surrendered. Saudi Arabia, with one of the most expensive militaries on the planet, spent nearly 10 years trying to defeat the Houthis in Yemen, a group far smaller and less capable than Iran's military. They failed completely. If Saudi Arabia could not take Yemen, the idea that America can take Iran with a few thousand paratroopers and some Marines is not just optimistic, it is delusional. But that is the thing. The Pentagon knows all of this. The generals know it. The intelligence agencies know it. So why is America still sending ground troops? Because the real plan is probably not a full invasion. The real plan is most likely a limited operation. A quick strike on Karg Island to cut off Iran's oil money, or a raid on coastal missile sites to try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon calls these kinds of operations limited in scope and duration. Go in fast, hit the target, get out before Iran can respond in force. The problem is that Iran knows this too, and Iran's entire strategy is built around making sure that any limited operation turns into an unlimited nightmare. If American Marines land on Karg Island, Iran does not need to retake the island with a traditional military assault. It just needs to fire enough missiles at it to make holding it impossible. Karg Island is 15 miles from the Iranian mainland. Every inch of that island is within range of Iranian rockets, artillery, and coastal missiles. American soldiers on Karg would be sitting targets in the most heavily armed shooting gallery on Earth. How long can you hold a tiny island when the enemy can hit every square foot of it from the shore? Is that a mission American families should be comfortable sending their sons and daughters into, or is the Pentagon gambling with lives for an objective that might not even be holdable? And here is where Iran's real trap closes. Any American casualties on Iranian soil or on Karg Island change the politics of this war overnight. Right now, the war is abstract for most Americans. Planes drop bombs, ships fire missiles, and it all happens on the other side of the world. But the moment American soldiers start coming home in body bags, the war becomes personal. And Iran knows from watching America in Afghanistan and Iraq that American public support for a war drops like a rock the moment casualties start mounting. Iran does not need to win a military victory. It just needs to make the war expensive enough in American blood that the public turns against it. That is the trap. That is what Iran means when it says it is waiting. And that brings us to something that almost nobody is discussing. The cost. Not just the human cost, but the financial cost. The Navy has already spent over $1 billion just dealing with the Houthis in the Red Sea before this war even started. $1 billion fighting a group whose entire military budget probably would not cover the fuel bill for a single American aircraft carrier. The air campaign over Iran is burning through precision-guided missiles that cost between $1 and $2 million each. A single day of operations over Iran costs more than what some countries spend on their entire military in a year. Now add ground troops. Soldiers need food, water, ammunition, fuel, medical support, armor, helicopters, and constant air cover. The cost of keeping even 5,000 soldiers in a combat zone runs into tens of millions of dollars per day. And that money is coming from somewhere. It is coming from roads that do not get built, schools that do not get funded, and a national debt that is already over $34 trillion. Meanwhile, Iran's strategy costs almost nothing by comparison. A ballistic missile costs Iran a few $100,000. The soldier it is aimed at is protected by a missile defense system that costs tens of millions. An Iranian naval mine costs a few $1,000s to build and drop into the water. The minesweeper sent to clear it costs hundreds of millions. This is the core of what military thinkers call cost imposition. You force your enemy to spend $100 defending against every $1 you spend attacking. Over time, even the richest country on Earth starts feeling the pressure. Iran cannot outfight America, but it can absolutely outspend America in this kind of war, where cheap weapons are used against expensive defenses. There is a historical pattern here that should worry everyone in Washington. The Soviet Union did not collapse because it lost a battle. It collapsed because it spent itself into the ground trying to maintain a military that it could not afford. America is not the Soviet Union, not by a long shot. But the principle is the same. Wars that drag on, that keep expanding, that require more troops and more money with no clear end in sight, those wars drain superpowers. They do not drain them in a year or 5 years. They drain them slowly, invisibly, until one day the bills come due and there is nothing left in the account. There is also something happening right now that most people are not connecting to the ground troop question. The war just entered its second month. Trump originally said this would be a quick operation. His administration promised it would not become a forever war. But here we are on day 30 and the situation is getting worse, not better. The Houthis joined the fight. Hezbollah is active in Lebanon. Iranian-backed militias are attacking bases in Iraq. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Oil is still over $100, and now ground troops are being deployed. Every single one of these developments moves the war further from quick and decisive and closer to long and messy. America has seen this movie before. Afghanistan was supposed to take months. It took 20 years. Iraq was supposed to be a quick liberation. It turned into an 8-year occupation that cost over $1 trillion and thousands of American lives. Iran is bigger than both of those countries combined, with a stronger military, harder terrain, and a population that has been preparing for this fight since before most American soldiers were born. The clock is ticking toward April 6th, when Trump's latest deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz expires. If diplomacy fails, and the bombing escalates to power plants and energy infrastructure, the pressure to send ground troops will increase enormously. And that is exactly the sequence of events Iran is counting on. push America into a corner where the only option left is boots on the ground, and then make those boots pay a price so high that Washington starts looking for the exit. And here's the part that ties everything back to you, regardless of where you live. If American ground troops enter Iran and the war escalates the way experts predict, the economic damage will not stay in the Middle East. Oil at $150 a barrel means $5 or $6 gasoline across America. It means trucking costs go up, which means everything that arrives at a store by truck, which is basically everything, gets more expensive. It means airlines raise ticket prices. It means heating bills spike. It means the Federal Reserve faces an impossible choice between raising interest rates to fight inflation, which would crush the housing market and trigger layoffs, or keeping rates low and letting prices spiral out of control. Neither option is good. Both options hurt ordinary people. And there is a global dimension that America's rivals are watching very carefully. China has said almost nothing publicly about this war. But behind closed doors, Chinese military analysts are studying every detail of how America is fighting, what weapons it is using, how its logistics work, and most importantly, where the weaknesses are. If America gets bogged down in a ground war with Iran, every military resource pulled into the Middle East is a resource that is not available in the Pacific. Every dollar spent on operations in the Persian Gulf is a dollar not spent on deterring China from making a move on Taiwan. Iran's generals may not think about Taiwan when they plan their defense, but the strategists in Beijing certainly do. Whether that strategy works depends on whether the people making decisions in Washington have learned anything from the last 20 years. Afghanistan taught us that you can defeat an enemy's army without defeating the country. Iraq taught us that removing a government is easy, but replacing it is nearly impossible. Iran is both of those lessons combined, multiplied by mountains, missiles, and a population 3 times the size of Iraq. If you found value in this breakdown, share it with someone who needs to understand what is really at stake before the next escalation.